What's up, guys? My name is Jerry, and today we're going to be talking about the shot that sent the Oklahoma City Thunder into a rebuild, and we're going to jump right into the video. Now we're going to have to travel back to the 2018-2019 NBA season, and the first thing we're going to do is look at the roster of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And in my personal opinion, I think that was the best team they had since Kevin Durant left in free agency. They had two superstars in Russell Westbrook and Paul George, and at the time, Westbrook was still Mr. Triple-Double. He had a monster statistical season. He averaged 23 points per game to go along with 11 assists and 11 rebounds. And then Paul George had the best statistical season of his NBA career. He put up 28 points per game to go along with 8 rebounds and 4 assists. So they had a pretty good dynamic duo. They also had some really solid role players. They had guys like Steven Adams, who had a pretty good year for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He put up 14 points per game to go along with 9.5 rebounds. And you gotta love Steven Adams because he does all of the little things. He sets some of the best screens in all of the NBA, and every offensive and defensive possession he is boxing out and hitting the glass. They also had Jeremy Grant, who I thought was very underrated at the time. He put up 13.5 points per game, and offensively he was a guy that could knock down his wide open shots, and then he also did a great job of cutting and finishing around the rim, and he also got it done on the defensive side of the ball. He was a very versatile defender. He could guard multiple positions, and we all know how valued that is in the NBA today. They also had Dennis Schroeder, who did a great job of playing that 6-man role. He came off the bench and put up 15 points per game to go along with 4 assists. And I also want to point out, at the time, the Oklahoma City Thunder had a very athletic starting 5. They had Westbrook at the 1, Terrence Ferguson at the 2, Paul George at the 3, Jeremy Grant at the 4, and Steven Adams at the 5. So 1 through 4, they could often switch everything, and this allowed them to cause a lot of headaches on the defensive side of the ball. Westbrook averaged 2 steals per game, and he actually led the NBA in defensive rating that season. Paul George also averaged 2 steals per game. Even Steven Adams, he averaged 1.5 steals per game. So they were very disruptive on the defensive side of the ball. So they had a really solid roster, and they finished with a record of 49-33, and it was good enough to get them the 6th seed in the Western Conference, which led to them facing the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round of the NBA playoffs. Now, the 2018-2019 Portland Trail Blazers, they were a really good team. They had a nasty backcourt duo that consisted of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. During that season, Dame put up 25 points per game to go along with 7 assists, and CJ McCollum averaged 21 points per game to go along with 3 assists. And the great thing about this Portland Trail Blazers roster, they had the correct role players surrounding Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. They had 2 guys in Al-Farouq Amino and Mo Harkless who could guard multiple positions. Night in and night out, they were guarding the opposing team's best players. And this allowed Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum not to be in so many uncomfortable defensive situations. The Trailblazers also had a low post threat in Yusuf Nurkic, who gave you a little bit more as well. He was really good in screen and roll situations as the screener, really good finisher around the rim. also a very underrated passer, and he had a really good season for the Portland Trail Blazers, averaging a double-double, putting up 15 points per game to go along with 10 rebounds. The Trailblazers also had a lot of utility players. They had additional shooters like Seth Curry and Rodney Hood. They had Evan Turner, who did a little bit of everything on both sides of the ball. And then they had additional size in their front court. They had guys like Zach Collins and Enes Kanter, who both played some valuable minutes for the Portland Trailblazers that season. So with all of that being said, the Trailblazers finished with a record of 53-29, and it was good enough to get them the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. Now that we've looked at the rosters of both of these teams and how they performed during the regular season, we can now get into the playoff series between the two and talk about what led up to the legendary shot by Damian Lillard. Now, the first thing I want to say is that this was a very entertaining playoff series for a bunch of reasons. We had two teams that seemed to be evenly matched, and there was no overwhelming favorite. And then we had two of the best point guards in the NBA going head to head, and it seemed like Damian Lillard and Russell Westbrook, they both knew the winner of this series was going to be crowned the better point guard, and both of these guys were competing hard. And then one of my favorite things, they were talking trash to each other. They had some heated moments getting into each other's faces, and as NBA fans, that's the type of stuff we love, especially in the playoff atmosphere. Now, this series would only end up going 5 games, but in game 5 of that series, Damian Lillard will become a playoff legend. Now, Damian Lillard was already known for being one of the clutchest players in the NBA. He already had some game winners under his belt, and before the shot against the Oklahoma City Thunder, his most iconic game winner was probably the shot against the Houston Rockets during the playoffs when he knocked down the walk-off three-pointer off the inbound play to send home James Harden and the Houston Rockets. But in this game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think it was a very pivotal game for both teams. Obviously, the Portland Trail Blazers, they win this game, they advance and go to the next round. And if the Thunder were to win game 5, still in an elimination game on the road, would have gave them a ton of momentum going back to their home crowd, and they could have potentially forced a game 7. And we all know how game 7s work in the NBA. They could go either way. So this was a big time game for both teams. And if we look back at that game 5, it was a very entertaining game, and it was back and forth the entire way. And it looked like the Oklahoma City Thunder had this game won. There was about 1 minute and 40 seconds left to go in the game, and the Oklahoma City Thunder were up by 6 points. We would then see Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum put together a string of plays to get their team back within reach. We look at the final 2 possessions of this game. It was tied up at 1:15 apiece, about 32 seconds left to go, and Russell Westbrook has the ball for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was being guarded by Al-Farouq Aminu. He was able to get to the rim, puts up a tough layup that he misses, and the Trailblazers get the rebound, and they get the ball to Damian Lillard. He brings it up the court. He calls an ISO. He's being guarded by Paul George, and Damian Lillard waits until there's just enough time for his shot to be the last shot of the ball game. He takes a deep sidestep 3, and he knocks it down right at the buzzer. We will then see Damian Lillard do his legendary celebration, waving goodbye to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So there you guys have it, the shot that sent the Thunder into a full-scale rebuild. The following season, they traded away both Russell Westbrook and Paul George, and we look at the Thunder 3 years later, they have a completely different roster that's full of young talent. They now have one of the brightest futures in the NBA. They have guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, they have Josh Giddey, and they just drafted Chet Holmgren with the number 2 overall pick, and they still have a lot of draft capital. So things are looking pretty good for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that's going going to be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below if you agree or disagree, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.